Hello, and welcome to Global Policy Forum's vodcast series. We are joined today by Gerald Martone, Director of Humanitarian Affairs for the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian NGO that offers care and assistance to refugees in over 40 countries worldwide. Today, Gerald will be speaking with us about the integration of civilian and military affairs in conflict situations. In Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, the United States and other powers have been increasingly relying on their military forces to provide direct aid services to conflict-affected populations. This is a central component of the counterinsurgency strategy supported by General David Petraeus and others. Previously, international NGOs and civilian groups, including USAID and various UN agencies, were primarily responsible for these humanitarian activities. As security, development, and humanitarian roles have become more integrated in peacebuilding missions, the lines of demarcation between military personnel and aid workers have blurred. As such, civilian aid workers who are in conflict zones to provide humanitarian relief may be more likely targets for violent attacks because they are seen as being a part of a military effort.
The idea of integrated missions or integration of UN and development presence in a country is actually a good one. It makes sense in terms of coherence of the international effort in a country. It's entirely logical. Unfortunately, for countries at war, countries in conflict, an integrated mission for humanitarian aid providers turns out to be a very dangerous thing. For us, it's a matter of life and death. Because of political and military missions are seen as belligerents in a conflict, they're not neutral or independent. By our association with the military or political mission, we are tainted by that. Our perceptions of being independent and impartial and distant from the conflict is vital to our safety. It's that understanding that protects us from militias from being attacked. For a military force in a foreign country to be occupying or conquering territory, they have a public relations problem, and that's one of resentment and suspicion on the part of people of why they're there. To reduce that sense of suspicion and animosity toward the military, they'll often get involved in helpful projects, humanitarian assistance projects, quick impact projects, such as rebuilding a school, paving roads, building a bridge, repairing a hospital. These kinds of projects are often referred to as hearts and minds projects. And the term hearts and minds goes back to the Vietnam War, where U.S. military forces also engaged in helpful projects with villages to expand the notion beyond merely an aggressor of the military forces. Now, we're not particularly fond of that in the civilian aid worker sector, but military forces around the world since the history of organized army have always conducted relief projects as part of their hearts and minds or attempts to win favor of the local population. If you look at Alexander the Great, the Chinese Moguls, even Marcus Aurelius, various military leaders have invoked this as a way to reduce resistance, to soften the environment for the acceptance of these foreign forces. So the legacy of military doing humanitarian assistance projects goes back centuries. They've been doing it a lot longer than we have. But at this day and age, we feel that now that there's a professional civilian aid industry, that we're the ones better off placed to do these kinds of projects. Within the United Nations, this issue of integrated missions is a contentious issue. There are many that believe that integration, one UN, unified missions are the way to go. This is the only way that you can have coherence of the many United Nations players in a country, and that's certainly a respectable position. But in situations of conflict where Western outsiders are viewed as an antagonist in a conflict, this then makes it difficult for us as Western aid workers to operate there. The peacekeeping forces now the United Nations peacekeepers is the second largest deployed military in the world, second only to the United States. They also, in all the countries they operate, in the 20 or so countries where there are peacekeeping missions, also do humanitarian assistance projects, quick impact projects, the kinds of projects I mentioned before: schools, hospitals, roads, highly visible infrastructure projects. This is part of peacekeeping doctrine. It is part of why they're there, and although we don't like it, it is part of their doctrine, and there's a case to be made for it, where their own soldiers not only want greater contact with the community, but also want to improve their perception among the community. What we urge is that how it's done, that it's done in a way that distinguishes it from the civilian effort, to show that when the civilian aid groups are not part of this larger experiment in their presence in that country. There are several countries where the U.S. military has such a large budget that they actually are making grants to the Department of State, U.S. Department of State, to do relief projects and development projects, and even through the Department of State pass through funds to NGOs to implement projects, which is quite ironic, but also puts those NGOs in a peculiar and uncomfortable position of receiving funds from the U.S. military to carry out projects in many communities. Over the last couple of years, aid work around the world has become increasingly dangerous. Aid workers are often targeted. It used to be that we were seen as neutral, independent outsiders, seen as charitable groups, but lately there's a great deal more suspicion of why these groups are there. So any connection with the military taints us, contaminates the perception we want to have with the communities, which is we're here on the basis of humanity and we're independent and impartial.
In response to this trend, many NGOs have urged a separation of security, development, and humanitarian activities. They suggest that the task of rebuilding societies and promoting sustainable development should be left to the real experts of aid delivery, civilian organizations.